Hey, my beautiful bitches, it's me, Fiona St. James, and welcome to another episode of Fiona's Coffee Talks. And as always, I like to start off every day with a fresh, hot, black cup of coffee. Hold the cream! I'd love to. Of course, I think of my favorite quote of the century by Oscar Wilde, which says, life is too important to be taken seriously, so lighten up, folks. So today's topic is, drumroll please, travel time number 4, yay! Okay, so number 3 was my European vacation. So now we're going to fast forward 1997. We're going to call this going down under, literally, no pun intended, but that was the first time, the one and only time that I went to Australia. So I mentioned in the past video how working in retail, specifically at Bloomingdale's, had its perks because you meet people. And I did a lot of traveling because of meeting people at the store. So this time wasn't any different because I met this couple, Gary and Ian, who live in Australia. And we had met like maybe, I don't know, 6 months before. And, we hung out. Wonderful guys. I'm still actually in contact with them even after this many years. And I was living on the Upper West Side at the time. And of course, they were like, oh, come to Australia and see us. So I always in the back of my mind, I thought that would happen. And so we were in touch. And I remember even the movie Stonewall that I had shot in 1994. It was a Dendy production and it was filmed in the Dendy Productions is Australia, so it was Dendy and BBC. So I remember in like 95, they sent me an envelope. And when I opened the envelope, there was a pullout and there was a picture of like these still shots talking about Stonewall. And I was in like one little picture, and there was like a whole collage of them. And then when you turned it over, it was actually the movie poster, which is a picture of me, which was kind of wonderful. And that was the poster all over Australia and Europe. And they said to me, oh my God, the movie size posts are plastered all over Australia. And it was that picture. Anyway, so fast forward 1997, they lived in Melbourne. And it was like around towards the end of March. So I went, planned it all. The trip was a nightmare because it was like 5-hour trip to LAX, and then from LAX I went to Auckland, New Zealand, which was like a 14-hour flight, and then like a 3-hour flight to Melbourne. And with the time difference, it's like the first flight was like Wednesday at like 3 p.m. and I arrived like Friday morning, and I was exhausted, but it was incredible to see them. And Melbourne, that's the home of the Australian Open, and there's just wonderful sights. And like that, this was the other time in my life that I was like, if I never left Australia and never came back to the States, I would not have even cared because it was just so beautiful. Beautiful people inside and out. And I've always said, I think it's something in the water because it's the caliber of people is like nothing I've ever seen anywhere. And that's true still. Like even when I meet people in the States that are from Australia, I'm always like, so beautiful. And not only on the outside, but as I said, on the inside. So I spent all this, I was there for like, I don't know, a week or so. And met a lot of their friends. They even like threw me a party. It was so great. And they had like all of these like gay couple friends, and they were a couple, and they had a couple of single ones. And, I was like their little like New York City boy that like, went to visit them. So they had this party for me and it was wonderful. And of course, all the major sites that you should see in Melbourne. Then from there, I jumped on a plane and went to Brisbane. I had a friend of mine living there, Raymond. We're going to put friend in quotes as well, who I had met at Bloomingdale's also. And he was like, oh, come see me. And I said, oh, I'm planning my trip. So I went and I stayed with him for a week. Within that week, we went to this beach resort called Noosa, which is quite wonderful too. So I spent a week there. And Brisbane was great. And when I was in Brisbane, this other dear friend of mine who I had met in the States, Yanni, I was able to see him as well. So it's great, like when you have friends in other countries and you're going to go anyway, and then you end up meeting up with them. So that's what happened there. And Brisbane was great. Noosa was a much needed 3-4 days of sunshine, especially, after that travel day, 10 days before, because it took me a minute to kind of like recoup. And honey, I was a lot younger back then than I am now. Now, I don't know, I could even handle it. Although, watch me, yes, I could. So then from Brisbane and Noosa, which was about 7, 8 days, then I went to Sydney. Sydney, Australia, honey. That's the shit right there. I was there for 10 days. That was completely incredible for me. That was where I was like, I never want to leave here. And that to me was like the highlight of the trip. So I had met this other guy in New York, a Barracuda bar named Alan, who lived in Sydney. And he had said, oh, and we got together a couple of times while he was here in New York, like the year before. And he's like, if you ever want to come to Sydney, so I agreed to stay with him. But see, this is where it gets tricky if it's someone that you've been with before. Because look, but whenever I would let people stay with me, I would always say, we've done what we've done, but you're on vacation. I get it. Have your fun. We could have our fun. You could have your fun, but come and go as you please. I'm not, here's the keys, do your own thing. And I expressed that to this guy, Alan was his name, just so you get a visual feel. And I was like, I'm not, we ain't married. I'm young, I'm cute, I'm in Sydney. Understand, this is what I do when I'm on vacation. Apart from all the cultural things in the Sydney Opera House and all these other wonderful things that I went to. And the first couple of days, like, he worked for the Parliament, so he was a bit of a politician. So, they all full of shit. Let's keep it real. And then the first couple of days, it was like he showed me around, but he was going to work. But I kind of figured out where everything was, and then we would, go to dinner, fool around. So we were being intimate. But then I guess in his mind, he kind of thought that that's what would happen every day, and that wasn't our agreement. So I think by day 3 it was, he was at work all day, and girl, I went to the bathhouse, the sauna as they call it, and oh my God, that to me, that particular experience to date, I think was the most incredible, sexual experience that I've ever had, where 5 hours, 5 of the hottest men I've ever seen. And it was and by the time I was done, I couldn't even feel the floor. I felt like I was floating, girl. It was amazing. And then I was meeting up with Alan at this, I forget what the bar was. It's actually in my book, starting page 143, Going Down Under, literally, Life and Crimes of Fiona St. James. FionaSt.James.com is where you can get it. I digress. But when I went and met him there, I was kind of talking freely because that's what I do, even with these videos. I don't really hide much. So I said how, I was just just at the sauna. And I had met these other people. He showed up, so we were all there hanging out as a group. But then he would, I don't know if he got a little slighted by the fact that I was so open and honest about that, because maybe he thought we were whatever being the key word. So, and then he sort of threw attitude, gave me attitude and left. And so, I do what a bitch like me does, which is I met someone who I had met who was in the group, hot as fuck. He lived nearby. He's like, let's go back to my place. So I did, and I ended up spending the night. And then the next morning, when I went back to where I was staying, and I had keys, I even made myself the keys. This idiot, I'm gonna stay with you, and you can't fucking make me keys. I spent the money to get the keys made, and then when I got back home to his home, he had already gone to work, and he had a couple of roommates who were a little shady because I guess he told them whatever. And then all of a sudden, this bitch had packed my bags and had them by the front door. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, guess what, bitch? I'm resourceful, and I don't travel with a lot anyway. So I was traveling light. So I took my shit, and I forget, I went somewhere. I was in the heart of Sydney. I forget what the name of that street is, but the gay section. And I was in some local gay bar, and I was talking to the bartender, as most people do, they're like therapists, like your hairdresser. And I was saying what happened, and he was like, girl, go to this place right over here. And there was a place up the road that was a gay bed and breakfast that was extremely affordable. And so I ended up checking in there, and then I was there for like a week, and it was the best thing that I could have done because then he didn't necessarily live in the main part of town anyway, so it was a little, not a huge journey, but a little bit of a commute. And so then when all was said and done, I was like, all right, well, I know how, somehow I always manage to land on my back, my feet, but you know what I mean. So, and then that to me, like the moment I left him and then was on my own accord, that was when the fun really began. And then it was like liberating. Because remember, like the trip up until that point, I was staying with people. And although I was doing my own thing, there still is that sense of obligation. And girl, I ain't trying to be obligated to no one. That's the truth. So I did that, had an incredible time. Did end up meeting someone else in Sydney that I spent a lot of time with as well. I know it was funny. It seems like I would always, when I go to these places, I meet someone and spend time with them, but then they get it that I'm on vacation and I got to do my own thing as well. And that's what ended up happening in Sydney. And, and then I came back home, and then the flight back was kind of crazy because then you get all the time back. So I remember I left at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon from Sydney, landed in LAX 17 hours later, but the same very Sunday, but 12 noon. Then the 5-hour flight to New York, but then 3-hour difference. So I remember I got home at like 8, 9 at night. And after traveling all those hours, and had to be at Bloomingdale's the very next day because I utilized like every vacation day I could. And I just remember the next day, like, feeling still exhilarated and not tired. But then by the time I got home that night, girl, I collapsed. And I was like, whoa. But, and I haven't been back, and I've always wanted to go back because, Sydney and then Amsterdam, which I spoke about in the last video, those are the two places where if I would have ever stayed there and not come back to the States, I would have been fine. In the States, the only other place that I could think of where I would love to live was San Francisco, which I've been there like a dozen times. But anyway, that's the scoop. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Don't forget, thumbs up, subscribe if you have not. Oh, P.S. Check out my video that I posted last Sunday with Matt Cullen on YouTube. It's a great video, and I had a lot of fun doing it. We're going to do a part 2 when he comes back to New York. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you soon. Love you.